Welcome to Double Your Speaking Confidence in 7 Days. Have you ever felt your heart racing when someone asks you a question in English? Or maybe you found yourself struggling to find the right words, even though you know the grammar rules. If so, you're not alone. Millions of English learners around the world face the same challenge every day. Hello there, English learners. Welcome to LMJ English, where we believe that everyone can speak English with confidence. I'm thrilled to have you join me on this exciting journey to transform your speaking skills in just 7 days. Before we dive into our story, let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you could speak English confidently? Imagine walking into a room full of English speakers and feeling completely at ease. Imagine expressing your thoughts clearly without hesitation. This isn't just a dream. It can be your reality. In the next 7 days, I'll take you through John's journey, an English learner just like you who transformed his speaking skills and doubled his confidence in just 1 week. His story will inspire you and show you that you too can make remarkable progress in a short time. If you're enjoying this story and want more content like this to boost your English skills, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing to LMJ English, you'll get access to more inspiring stories, useful tips and practical exercises to help you on your language learning journey. Now, let's begin our story of transformation, courage, and newfound confidence. You ready to double your speaking confidence in just 7 days? Let's go. The power of confidence in English speaking. John Baker sat nervously in the coffee shop, staring at his phone. In 5 minutes, he would have his first job interview in English. After studying the language for years, he knew the grammar rules and had a decent vocabulary. But whenever he needed to speak, fear took over. His palms would sweat, his mind would go blank, and the words would come out all wrong. Today was important. This international company offered the perfect position for his skills, but the interview would be entirely in English. As John waited, he recalled his English learning journey. He had spent countless hours studying textbooks, completing grammar exercises, and memorizing vocabulary lists. Yet here he was, terrified of a simple conversation. What was missing? The answer was clear: confidence. All his knowledge meant little without the confidence to use it. The interview was a disaster. John stumbled over simple questions, forgot basic vocabulary, and eventually gave up trying to express his complex thoughts. The interviewer was kind but clearly unimpressed. Walking home in the rain, John made a decision. Something had to change. He needed to find a way to build his speaking confidence, and he needed to do it quickly. His friend had mentioned an online program called Double Your Speaking Confidence in 7 Days. Initially skeptical, John now felt desperate enough to try anything. That evening, John signed up for the program. The welcome message was simple. Speaking confidence isn't about perfect grammar or extensive vocabulary. It's about believing in your ability to communicate, regardless of mistakes. In the next 7 days, you'll transform your relationship with English speaking. John wasn't convinced, but he committed to following the program exactly as instructed for the full week. What John didn't realize yet was that confidence in speaking English comes from practice, not perfection. Many learners spend years studying the language without ever gaining the confidence to use it freely. They focus on avoiding mistakes instead of embracing communication. The fear of judgment keeps them silent, preventing the very practice they need to improve. John was about to discover that breaking this cycle would change not just his English skills, but his entire approach to learning and life, overcoming your fear of speaking. Day 1 began with a simple but powerful exercise. John was instructed to speak English aloud for 5 minutes, talking about anything that came to mind. The topic didn't matter. He could describe his room, talk about his day, or even recite a grocery list. What mattered was getting comfortable with the sound of his own voice speaking English. John felt foolish at first, sitting alone in his apartment speaking to the walls. He started describing his morning routine. I wake up at 6:30, I brush my teeth, I make coffee. His speech was slow and stilted, with long pauses between sentences. But as the minutes passed, something interesting happened. Without the pressure of a listener, John found himself relaxing. By the end of the 5 minutes, his speech had become more fluid. The program explained that speaking anxiety often stems from 3 main fears: fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged, and fear of not finding the right words. The first step to overcoming these fears was understanding that they were normal but ultimately unhelpful. Everyone makes mistakes when learning a language. Even native speakers make errors in their own language every day. The second exercise required John to make intentional mistakes while speaking. This seemed counterintuitive, but the purpose was to prove that making errors wasn't catastrophic. John practiced saying sentences with deliberate grammar mistakes. Yesterday, I go to store and buying many vegetable. Surprisingly, he found this liberating. If he could intentionally make mistakes without the world ending, perhaps making accidental ones wasn't so terrible. That evening, John completed the final exercise for day 1, recording himself speaking, for 1 minute about why he wanted to improve his English. Listening to the recording was uncomfortable. He noticed his hesitations, his pronunciation errors, and his limited vocabulary. But the program asked him to focus on the positives. Had he communicated his message? Yes. Would a listener understand his main points? Probably. Instead of criticizing himself, John wrote down 3 things he did well in the recording. This small shift in perspective was the first step toward building his confidence. Finding your voice through daily practice. On day 2, John woke up feeling slightly more positive about his English skills. The program instructed him to create a morning routine for language practice. Before checking his phone or email, he would spend 15 minutes with English. This morning ritual would set the tone for the day and ensure consistent practice. The first technique John learned was called shadow speaking. He found a 2-minute clip of a simple English conversation, played it at half speed, and tried to repeat what the speakers said with the same pronunciation and intonation. At first, he could only manage a few words before falling behind, but after several attempts, he started to catch the rhythm of the speech. The program explained that shadow speaking helps train the mouth and brain to produce English sounds more naturally, building muscle memory for speaking. Later that morning, John was introduced to thinking aloud in English. During his commute to work, instead of switching to his native language in his head, he practiced describing his surroundings in English. The bus is crowded today. The woman next to me is reading a book. I wonder what it's about. This simple exercise forced him to activate his vocabulary in real time without the pressure of a conversation partner. The most challenging exercise came in the afternoon. John was asked to record himself telling a story from his childhood in English. The recording should last at least 3 minutes, with no preparation beforehand. John chose to describe his 10th birthday party. As he spoke, he struggled to find words and often paused to think. Several times he wanted to stop the recording and start over, but the instructions were clear. Continue speaking, even through mistakes and hesitations. When he finished, John was surprised to find that despite the imperfections, he had managed to tell a coherent story. The program asked him to listen to the recording again the next day, to notice improvement since his first recording. This daily practice was starting to show John that speaking English wasn't about being perfect. It was about communicating effectively despite limitations, building your conversation skills. By day 3, John was developing a routine with his English practice. The morning began with shadow speaking, followed by thinking aloud during his commute. Today's focus would be conversation skills, how to keep a discussion flowing naturally. The program introduced John to the concept of conversation fillers, phrases native speakers use to buy thinking time. Expressions like, well, let me see, "That's an interesting question," or "I've never thought about it that way," could give him precious seconds to formulate his thoughts without awkward silences. John wrote these phrases on small cards to keep in his pocket, planning to use at least 3 of them during the day. The next lesson focused on small talk strategies. Many learners struggle with casual conversation, but these everyday exchanges build confidence for more complex discussions. John learned simple question formats that could apply to almost any situation. What do you think about? Have you ever? What's your experience with? These open-ended questions could help him initiate and sustain conversations without needing specialized vocabulary. That afternoon, John faced his biggest challenge yet. The program instructed him to find a conversation partner for a 15-minute English discussion. This could be a language exchange partner online, a colleague who speaks English, or even a friendly barista at a coffee shop. Feeling nervous but determined, John decided to visit a cafe near his office that was popular with international students. While ordering his coffee, John asked the barista, "Do you mind if I practice my English with you for a few minutes? I'm working on improving my speaking skills." To his surprise, the young woman smiled and said, "Sure, it's not busy right now. Where are you from?" Using his newly learned conversation starters, John managed to maintain a 5-minute conversation about coffee preferences, weekend plans, and good movies to watch. He stumbled several times and forgot the word recommendation, describing it instead as "when you tell someone about something good." But the barista understood him, and the conversation continued smoothly. Walking back to his office, John felt a surge of accomplishment. He had initiated a real conversation with a stranger and maintained it for several minutes despite his limitations. The program was right. Communication was possible even with imperfect language skills. For the first time, John began to believe that confidence in speaking wasn't some distant goal, but something he could develop through consistent practice. Expanding your vocabulary. Naturally. On day 4, John opened the program to find a new approach to vocabulary learning. Instead of memorizing long lists of isolated words, today would focus on learning useful phrases and expressions that could immediately improve his speaking abilities. The first exercise introduced lexical chunks, groups of words that native speakers use as single units. Instead of learning the words in, spite, of separately, John would learn the phrase "in spite of" as one chunk. The program explained that this approach helps learners sound more natural and reduces the mental effort needed during conversations. John was instructed to choose a specific context he often encountered in English. He selected professional meetings and learned 10 relevant lexical chunks. He wrote down phrases like "to follow up on," "to touch base with," "to bring someone up to speed," and "to run through the agenda." By learning these expressions as complete units, John would be able to use them fluently, without constructing them word by word. The afternoon activity introduced John to the concept of a personal phrasebook. Unlike a traditional vocabulary notebook with isolated words, this phrasebook would contain useful expressions organized by situation. John created sections for restaurant conversations, meeting a new person, expressing an opinion, and discussing future plans. Throughout the day, whenever he encountered useful phrases in his reading or listening practice, he added them to the appropriate section. That evening, John tried a new approach to learning vocabulary and context. Rather than studying a textbook, he chose a YouTube video about a topic he enjoyed: cooking. As he watched, he noted down interesting expressions the chef used. Bring to a simmer, fold in the ingredients and set aside to cool. He then recorded himself explaining a simple recipe using these new phrases. Though his explanation wasn't perfect, incorporating authentic language from a native speaker made his English sound more natural than before. This new approach to vocabulary expansion excited John. Rather than seeing vocabulary as an endless list of isolated words to memorize, He began to understand language as interconnected chunks of meaningful communication. By focusing on phrases he could immediately use in conversation, he was building not just knowledge, but practical speaking ability. Perfecting your pronunciation. Day 5 brought a new challenge: improving pronunciation. John had always felt self-conscious about his accent, often choosing simpler words he could pronounce correctly over more precise words he might mispronounce. The program explained that pronunciation isn't about eliminating accents entirely. Even native English speakers have different accents, but rather about being easily understood. The first exercise focused on identifying specific sounds that John struggled with. He recorded himself reading a paragraph containing many different English sounds. Listening back, he noticed he consistently had trouble with the th sound, replacing it with d or z, and he often confused the vowel sounds in words like sheet and seat. Having identified these problem areas, he could now practice them specifically. The program introduced John to minimal pairs, words that differ by only one sound, like ship, sheep, or think, sink. By practicing these pairs daily, he could train his ear to hear the differences and his mouth to produce the correct sounds. John felt slightly ridiculous repeating thin tin over and over on his balcony, but he was determined to improve. Later that day, John discovered the power of prosody, the rhythm, stress, and intonation of speech. He learned that English is a stress-timed language, meaning certain syllables are emphasized while others are reduced. This creates a distinctive rhythm that's crucial for clear communication. John practiced saying the sentence, "I wanted to take the bus to the city," with proper stress on the capitalized syllables, recording and listening to himself repeatedly. The most entertaining activity came in the evening, when John tackled tongue twisters. "She sells seashells by the seashore," and "red lorry, yellow lorry" left him laughing at his own mistakes. But with each attempt, the challenging sounds became slightly easier to produce. The program reminded him that perfect pronunciation wasn't the goal. Intelligibility was what mattered. If people could understand him, his accent was not a problem. That night, John realized something significant. His fear of imperfect pronunciation had been limiting his vocabulary and expression. By addressing this fear directly through targeted practice, he was freeing himself to use the full range of his English knowledge. Pronunciation was not about perfection, but communication, and this shift in perspective was profoundly liberating. Speaking with native speakers, Day 6 presented what would have been John's biggest fear just a few days ago: speaking with native English speakers. The program explained that while practicing alone was valuable, real conversations with fluent speakers would accelerate his progress dramatically. The first task was finding suitable conversation partners. The program suggested several options: language exchange websites where people trade practice in different languages, conversation meetups in local cafes, or online tutoring services. John discovered a weekly language exchange event at a bookstore near his apartment. Though nervous, he wrote it in his calendar for that evening. Before attending the meetup, John prepared himself with strategies for maintaining conversations with native speakers. He learned about asking clarification questions like, "Could you say that again?" or "I'm not familiar with that expression. What does it mean?" rather than nodding and pretending to understand. He also prepared a list of open-ended questions about topics he felt comfortable discussing, ensuring he could actively participate even if his vocabulary was limited. The program offered advice for handling the inevitable moments when John wouldn't understand something or wouldn't know how to express himself. Rather than panicking or giving up, he could use phrases like, "I'm trying to say that," or "Let me explain it another way." These strategies would help him navigate through difficult moments while keeping the conversation flowing. That evening, John arrived at the language exchange, feeling nervous but prepared. He introduced himself to a small group practicing English and explained that he was working on building his speaking confidence. To his surprise, the native speakers were patient and encouraging. When he struggled to explain a concept, they waited without interrupting. When he asked for clarification, they happily repeated themselves or explained unfamiliar expressions. During a conversation about travel, John forgot the word souvenir. Rather than giving up, he said, "You know, the things you buy in another country to remember your trip." The person he was speaking with immediately supplied the word, and the conversation continued smoothly. This small victory, communicating effectively despite forgetting a word, reinforced everything John had been learning about confidence and communication. At the end of the evening, one of the native speakers complimented John on his English, saying he expressed himself clearly. This unexpected praise gave John a boost of confidence. He realized that native speakers weren't judging his every mistake. They were simply engaging with his ideas and enjoying the conversation, measuring your progress and continuing the journey. On the final day of the program, John woke up with a surprising realization. He had been thinking in English as he drifted awake. This automatic shift to his second language would have seemed impossible just a week ago. Today's focus would be on measuring his progress and creating a sustainable plan for continued growth. The first exercise required John to record himself speaking about the same topic he had discussed in his Day 1 recording, why he wanted to improve his English. After completing the new recording, he listened to both versions side by side. The difference was remarkable. His Day 7 speech was more fluid, with fewer hesitations and a wider range of vocabulary. His pronunciation was clearer, and he sounded more confident. While far from perfect, the improvement in just 1 week was undeniable. The program guided John through a self-assessment of his speaking skills, identifying both his strengths and areas for continued development. His strengths included his growing ability to maintain conversations despite vocabulary limitations and his improved pronunciation of specific problem sounds. Areas to develop further included expanding his range of complex grammatical structures and building more specialized vocabulary for professional situations. Based on this assessment, John created a personalized plan for the next month. He would continue his daily morning routine of shadow speaking and thinking aloud. He would attend the language exchange weekly and schedule at least 2 coffee conversations with English speakers from work. He would expand his personal phrasebook with expressions specific to his professional field. Most importantly, he would maintain the confidence-building mindset the program had taught him, focusing on communication rather than perfection. That afternoon, John received a surprise email. The company where he had interviewed poorly a week ago was offering him a second interview opportunity. Apparently, his technical qualifications had impressed them enough to overlook his communication struggles. The interview would be in 2 days. Rather than panicking, John viewed this as an opportunity to apply everything he had learned. He prepared by researching company-specific vocabulary and practicing answers to common interview questions. He reminded himself that perfect English wasn't required. Effective communication was the goal. He prepared clarification phrases and thinking time expressions to use if needed. When the interview day arrived, John felt nervous but not terrified. As he answered the first question, he focused on communicating his ideas clearly, rather than speaking perfectly. He used natural pauses to gather his thoughts. When he didn't know a specific technical term in English, he described it in simpler words. The interviewer seemed to appreciate his effort and engagement. By the end of the interview, John knew he had performed much better than before. Whether or not he got the job, he had proven to himself that he could communicate effectively in a high-pressure situation. In just 7 days, he had transformed not just his speaking skills, but his entire relationship with the English language. Maintaining your newfound confidence. 3 months had passed since John completed the 7-day confidence program, and his relationship with English had fundamentally changed. He had secured the job after his second interview and now used English daily in his professional life. While he still made mistakes and occasionally struggled to find the right words, these challenges no longer paralyzed him with fear. The most significant change was in John's mindset. He had come to understand that language learning wasn't about reaching a mythical endpoint of perfection, but rather a continuous journey of improvement. Every conversation, every mistake, every new word learned was part of that journey. This perspective had transformed his daily experience with English from stress and anxiety to curiosity and growth. John maintained his confidence through consistent practice. His morning routine of shadow speaking and pronunciation exercises had become as automatic as brushing his teeth. He kept his personal phrasebook updated, regularly adding useful expressions he encountered. He attended the language exchange most weeks, now helping newer learners while continuing to improve his own skills. The most powerful confidence-building habit John had developed was reflection. Each weekend, he spent 15 minutes reviewing his English use during the week, noting situations where he communicated effectively and identifying areas for improvement. This regular self-assessment kept him aware of his progress, preventing the discouragement that comes from focusing only on mistakes. John had learned that confidence comes from competence, and competence comes from consistent practice. By maintaining daily English habits, he ensured that his skills would continue to improve over time. Even more importantly, he had learned to appreciate the process itself, finding enjoyment in the small victories of clear communication. One day, John noticed a new employee looking nervous before a meeting that would be conducted in English. He recognized the same anxiety he had felt months earlier. During a break, he approached the colleague and shared his experience with the confidence program, explaining how it had transformed his relationship with English speaking. As he spoke, John realized how far he had come from being paralyzed by speaking anxiety to mentoring others through the same challenge. Looking back, John could hardly believe that just 3 months ago, the thought of a job interview in English had terrified him. The 7-day program hadn't made him perfect, no program could, but it had given him something more valuable, the confidence to use what he knew effectively and the tools to continue improving. His journey with English would continue for years to come, but now he faced that journey with confidence rather than fear. As John told his colleague about the program, he shared his most important insight. The secret to confidence isn't avoiding mistakes. It's knowing you can communicate effectively despite them. That's what changes everything. Wasn't that an inspiring journey? I hope John's story has shown you that improving your speaking confidence isn't about reaching perfection. It's about taking consistent steps forward and embracing the learning process. If you've enjoyed this story and found it helpful, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to LMJ English. Your support helps us create more content like this to help English learners around the world. Remember, the comment section below is a great place to share your own speaking confidence journey or ask any questions you might have. Want to see real results in your own English speaking? Try following John's 7-day plan and let us know how it goes. Start small, be consistent, and most importantly, be kind to yourself along the way. Learning a language takes time, but with the right approach you can absolutely double your speaking confidence faster than you might think. Thank you so much for joining me today on LMJ English. Until next time, keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and remember, your English journey is unique and valuable. Vocabulary list: confidence, noun, belief in oneself and one's abilities. Example: speaking with confidence makes a huge difference in how others perceive your English. Anxiety, noun, a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about something. Example: John felt anxiety whenever he had to speak English in public. Mindset, noun, the established set of attitudes held by someone. Example, changing your mindset about making mistakes is essential for language learning. Hesitation, noun, the action of pausing before saying or doing something. Example, with practice, John's hesitations while speaking became less frequent. Shadow speaking, noun, a technique where you repeat what a native speaker says with the same pronunciation and intonation. Example, shadow speaking helped John improve his natural rhythm in English. Intonation, noun, the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. Example, proper intonation can make your English sound more natural to native speakers. Fluency, noun, the ability to speak a language easily and accurately. Example, daily practice significantly improved John's fluency in just 1 week. Pronunciation, noun, the way in which a word is spoken. Example, John focused on improving his pronunciation of difficult sounds like the E. Vocabulary, noun, the body of words used in a particular language. Example, expanding your vocabulary naturally through context is more effective than memorizing word lists. Persistence, noun, firm continuance in a course of action despite difficulty. Example, John's persistence with daily practice led to remarkable improvement. Clarification, noun, the action of making a statement or situation less confused and more clearly understood. Example, asking for clarification is better than pretending to understand. Lexical chunks, noun, groups of words that commonly appear together in English. Example, learning lexical chunks helped John sound more natural in conversation. Minimal, pairs, noun, pairs of words that differ in only one sound. Example, practicing minimal pairs like ship but sheep helped John improve specific sounds. Prosody, noun, the patterns of rhythm and sound in language. Example, understanding English prosody helped John sound more natural when speaking. Self-assessment, noun, evaluation of oneself or one's actions and attitudes. Example, regular self-assessment helped John track his progress and stay motivated. Competence, noun, the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Example, John's growing competence in English led to greater confidence. Perspective, noun, a particular attitude toward or way of regarding something. Example, changing his perspective on mistakes transformed John's learning experience. Stumble, verb, to make a mistake in speaking. Example, even when John stumbled over difficult words, he kept the conversation going. Initiative, noun, the ability to assess and initiate things independently. Example, taking the initiative to practice daily made all the difference in John's progress. Transformation, noun, a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance. Example, in just 7 days, John experienced a transformation in his speaking confidence.